The morning sun cast long shadows across Forest Lawn Memorial Park as Dr. Sarah Chen received the phone call that would change everything. As the lead forensic archaeologist for the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, she had handled countless cases, but nothing could have prepared her for what lay ahead. The voice on the other end belonged to Judge Marcus Williams, whose tone carried an unusual weight of authority mixed with something else, uncertainty. "Dr. Chen, we need you at Forest Lawn immediately. There's been a development regarding the Jackson family mausoleum." The judge paused, and Sarah could hear papers rustling in the background. "I'm issuing an emergency court order to open Michael Jackson's tomb. The family has requested it, and frankly, the circumstances are extraordinary." Sarah's coffee grew cold as she listened to the details. For 15 years, the King of Pop had rested in peace within the marble walls of the great mausoleum, his final resting place sealed with a kind of security typically reserved for national treasures. The Jackson family had paid millions to ensure their beloved Michael would never be disturbed. So why now? Why, after all these years of fierce protection and privacy, were they suddenly demanding his tomb be opened? The answer, Judge Williams explained, lay in a series of events that had begun 3 months earlier. Katherine Jackson, Michael's mother, now in her 90s, had been experiencing vivid dreams about her son. In these dreams, Michael appeared distressed, pointing repeatedly to his tomb and speaking words he couldn't quite understand. At first, the family dismissed these as a natural grief of a mother who had never truly accepted her son's death. But then the dreams spread. Janet Jackson began having similar visions. Then Tito. One by one, family members reported the same haunting experience, Michael appearing in their dreams, urgent and pleading, always gesturing toward his resting place. The dreams became so frequent and intense that several family members sought medical attention, convinced they were losing their minds. The breaking point came when Paris Jackson, Michael's daughter, approached the family with a revelation that sent shockwaves through their tight-knit circle. She had been secretly researching her father's final days, diving deep into medical records, witness statements, and circumstantial evidence that had never been fully explored. What she discovered would challenge everything they thought they knew about Michael's death and burial. "There are inconsistencies," Paris had told her grandmother Catherine during a tearful late-night conversation. "Things that don't add up. The timeline of events, the medical procedures, even the weight measurements from the coroner's office. I think we need to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be." Sarah arrived at Forest Lawn to find a scene unlike anything she had witnessed in her 20-year career. The usually serene Memorial Park buzzed with activity as security guards created a perimeter around the great mausoleum. News vans lined the streets outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking sunlight. Reporters pressed against barriers, shouting questions that would go unanswered until the investigation concluded. Inside the mausoleum, the Jackson family had gathered in a somber semicircle. Katherine Jackson sat in a wheelchair, her aged hands clasped tightly in her lap, while Janet stood beside her with protective intensity. The other siblings formed a protective barrier, their faces masks of determination mixed with dread. They had lived with the mystery of Michael's death for 15 years, accepting the official story while harboring private doubts that grew stronger with each passing year. Prince Jackson, Michael's eldest son, stepped forward as Sarah entered the sacred space. His resemblance to his father was striking, the same piercing eyes, the same graceful movements, the same aura of quiet strength. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice steady despite the emotional weight of the moment. "We appreciate you being here. This isn't easy for any of us, but we need answers. Our father deserved the truth, and so do his fans around the world." The tomb itself was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, constructed from the finest Italian marble and sealed with precision engineering that would have impressed bank vault designers. Golden nameplate bore the simple inscription, "Michael Joseph Jackson, 1958 to 2009, the King of Pop." Fresh flowers surrounded the entrance, left by fans who made daily pilgrimages to pay their respects. As Sarah examined the sealing mechanisms, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to uncover something that would rewrite history. The Jackson family's unified decision to open the tomb after years of fierce protection suggested they had discovered evidence compelling enough to risk public scrutiny and media frenzy. Whatever lay beyond that marble seal had convinced them that the truth was worth any price. The legal documentation was unprecedented in its scope and urgency. Judge Williams had granted permission not just for the tomb to be opened, but for complete forensic analysis of whatever they might find inside. The court order mentioned newly discovered evidence that may materially affect previous findings regarding cause and circumstances of death. Those words carried implications that sent chills down Sarah's spine. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the memorial park, Sarah completed her preliminary assessment and prepared her team for what would undoubtedly become one of the most scrutinized investigations in modern history. The world would be watching, waiting, and demanding answers to questions that had haunted Michael Jackson's legacy for over a decade. The atmosphere inside the great mausoleum was electric with tension as Sarah's team assembled their equipment. Each member had been carefully selected and sworn to absolute secrecy until the investigation concluded. Camera operators positioned themselves to document every moment, while forensic specialists prepared tools that would delicately penetrate the tomb's sophisticated sealing system without damaging whatever lay inside. Katherine Jackson's weathered hands gripped her wheelchair's armrests as she watched the preparation. Her eyes held a mixture of hope and terror. Hope that her dreams would finally make sense, terror of what truth might emerge from behind that marble barrier. Beside her, Janet Jackson placed a protective hand on her mother's shoulder, her own face a mask of controlled emotion. "Before we begin," Sarah announced to the gathered family, "I want everyone to understand what we might find. After 15 years, we could encounter anything from complete preservation to significant deterioration. We must be prepared for all possibilities." Her words hung heavy in the air, acknowledging the brutal reality that death brings to even the most beloved figures. The first seal required 3 hours to carefully remove. As each bolt and fastener was extracted, the sound echoed through the mausoleum like a countdown to revelation. Sarah had opened countless graves in her career, but this felt different. The weight of public expectation, the global impact of whatever they discovered, the profound grief of a family seeking closure, it all pressed down on the moment with unprecedented intensity. Paris Jackson stood apart from her family, filming everything on her phone with steady hands that betrayed none of the emotion burning in her eyes. She had been the catalyst for this moment, the one who had pushed hardest for the truth to emerge. Whatever they found, she was determined to document it completely, to ensure that nothing could be hidden or misrepresented later. As the final seal gave way, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The tomb's interior was bathed in soft LED lighting that had been installed during construction, designed to last decades without maintenance. The space was larger than expected, roughly the size of a small room, with walls lined in white silk that had maintained its pristine appearance despite the passage of time. But it was what occupied the center of the tomb that caused collective gasps from everyone present. The casket was there, exactly as it should be, a magnificent bronze masterpiece worth more than most people's homes. But positioned beside it, impossibly, was a second casket of identical design and craftsmanship. 2 caskets in a space designed for one, both bearing the same nameplate, both sealed with the same precision that had protected the tomb itself. "That's impossible," whispered Tito Jackson, his voice barely audible in the stunned silence. "We watched them lower one casket. We were there. We saw it happen." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Her first thought was that perhaps Michael's original casket had been damaged and replaced, with a damaged one remaining in the tomb for some reason. But that explanation crumbled under scrutiny. Why would a family that had spent millions on perfection accept such an arrangement? The discovery of the second casket transformed the investigation from a family's search for closure into something far more complex and potentially explosive. Sarah immediately contacted Judge Williams, whose shock was audible even through the phone. Within minutes, additional forensic specialists were en route, along with investigators from the Los Angeles Police Department Special Cases Division. While they waited for backup, Sarah conducted a preliminary examination of both caskets. The original casket, or what they assumed was the original, showed signs of being precisely positioned, as if placed by professionals who knew exactly what they were doing. The second casket appeared identical in every way, down to the serial numbers and manufacturer's marks. "Dr. Chen," Prince Jackson's voice cut through the tension, "there's something else you need to see." He pointed to the far wall of the tomb, where Sarah now noticed what appeared to be a small ventilation grate that didn't match the tomb's original architectural plans. Investigation of the grate revealed that it wasn't connected to any ventilation system. Instead, it concealed a small chamber containing a sealed envelope bearing a single word in elegant script: truth. The envelope was addressed to no one in particular, as if its creator had known that someday someone would find it and understand its significance. Inside the envelope, Sarah found a single sheet of paper covered in handwritten text that would change everything they thought they knew about Michael Jackson's death and burial. The handwriting was distinctive, flowing, and undeniably recognizable to anyone familiar with Michael's personal correspondence. But the implications of the letter's contents were so staggering that Sarah had to read it 3 times before she could process what she was seeing. The letter was dated 3 days before Michael's officially recorded death. In it, he described feeling threatened and fearful for his life. He wrote about people who wanted him silenced permanently, about pressures that had become unbearable, and about a plan he had been forced to devise to protect himself and his children. Most shocking of all, he wrote about staging his own death as the only way to escape forces that had made his life a living nightmare. If you are reading this, the letter concluded, then my plan has succeeded, but something has gone wrong. The second casket contains the truth about what really happened. Open it, but be prepared for the world to change forever. The Jackson family stood in stunned silence as Sarah read the letter aloud. Years of questions, inconsistencies, and nagging doubts suddenly began to make sense. The rushed funeral arrangements, the closed casket ceremony, the family's private moments of wondering if they had truly said goodbye to Michael, it all fell into place with terrifying clarity. Katherine Jackson's tears flowed freely as she reached out with trembling hands to touch the letter. "I knew," she whispered. "Somehow, deep down, I always knew. The dreams weren't just grief. They were Michael trying to tell us something." As additional investigators arrived and the tomb became a full-scale crime scene, one question dominated everyone's thoughts. If Michael Jackson had staged his own death 15 years ago, what had happened to make him unable to return? And more importantly, what would they find when they opened that second casket? The decision to open the second casket required another emergency court session, as Judge Williams grappled with legal implications that had no precedent in American jurisprudence. If the letter was authentic, they were no longer dealing with a simple exhumation but potentially with fraud, witness tampering, and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the entertainment industry. By evening, the great mausoleum had been transformed into a high-security forensic laboratory. Specialists from across the country had been flown in under cover of darkness, their identities classified to prevent leaks to the media that surrounded Forest Lawn like a siege army. The Jackson family remained throughout, understanding that they were witnessing history unfold in real time. Dr. Marcus Webb, the nation's leading forensic pathologist, arrived from Washington, D.C. to assist with the examination. His reputation was unimpeachable, his expertise in cases involving identity verification legendary. If anyone could definitively determine what they were dealing with, it was Webb. The first casket was opened with mechanical precision, cameras recording every moment for legal documentation. Inside, they found exactly what everyone expected: the preserved remains of Michael Jackson, exactly as he had appeared at his memorial service. The preservation was remarkable, the embalming techniques had been masterful, and every detail matched the official records from 2009. But something was wrong. The body showed signs of having been prepared for burial very recently, not 15 years ago. The tissue preservation, the color of the skin, the flexibility of the joints, everything suggested a death that had occurred months, not decades, earlier. "This is impossible," Dr. Webb muttered as he completed his examination. "According to everything I'm seeing, this person died sometime in the last 6 months, not in 2009. Either we're dealing with the most sophisticated preservation techniques ever developed, or—" He didn't finish the sentence because the implications were too staggering to voice aloud. The second casket presented an even greater mystery. When opened, it contained not a body but a sophisticated arrangement of recording equipment, hard drives, and documentation that painted a picture of corruption and conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of the music industry, pharmaceutical companies, and entertainment media. Among the materials was a video recording that Michael had made shortly before his supposed death. In it, he appeared healthy, alert, and deeply frightened. He spoke directly to the camera with a kind of intensity that had made him a global icon, but this time his message was one of desperation rather than artistry. If you're watching this, The recorded Michael began. Then something has gone terribly wrong with my plan. I faked my death because it was the only way to protect my children and gather evidence against people who wanted me destroyed. I've been living in hiding for 15 years, collecting proof of how they manipulated my life, my health, and my career. The recording continued for over an hour, detailing conspiracy that involved forced medication, financial manipulation, and threats against his children that had driven him to desperate measures. He had worked with a small group of trusted allies to stage his death, planning to return once he had gathered sufficient evidence to expose those who had made his life unbearable. But the plan had gone wrong in ways he couldn't have anticipated. The people he was investigating had discovered his survival and had been hunting him for 15 years. The recording served as both confession and accusation, naming specific individuals and providing documentation of crimes that would shake the entertainment industry to its foundations. Janet Jackson collapsed into a chair as the full scope of her brother's ordeal became clear. "He's been alive this whole time," she whispered through tears. "Alone, afraid, unable to come home to his children. What kind of hell has he been living?" The documentation in the second casket told that story in painful detail. For 15 years, Michael had lived like a ghost, moving from safe house to safe house, unable to contact his family directly for fear of exposing them to danger. He had survived on help from a network of loyal friends and supporters who had kept his secret at tremendous personal risk. But the most shocking revelation was yet to come. According to the final documents in the casket, Michael had been murdered just 6 months earlier when his enemies finally tracked him to his hiding place in South America. The first casket contained his actual remains, secretly returned to Forest Lawn by the same network that had protected him for 15 years. The letter with the casket explained that his protectors had made the difficult decision to place his real body in the tomb without informing the family immediately, hoping to gather additional evidence before revealing the truth. They had planned to contact the Jackson family within the year, but Catherine's dreams and Paris's investigation had accelerated the timeline. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the center of the transformed mausoleum, surrounded by evidence that would rewrite modern history. The implications were staggering. One of the most famous deaths of the 21st century had been staged. A beloved entertainer had lived 15 additional years in hiding in fear, and powerful interests had ultimately succeeded in silencing him permanently. Prince Jackson picked up one of the documents from the second casket, his hand trembling as he read his father's handwritten account of watching his own funeral from a safe house thousands of miles away. "He saw us grieve," Prince said, his voice breaking. "He watched us cry and couldn't comfort us. He spent 15 years knowing his children thought he was dead." The investigation team worked through the night, cataloging evidence that implicated dozens of individuals in various crimes ranging from conspiracy to fraud to murder. The network that had protected Michael had documented everything meticulously, creating a paper trail that would keep prosecutors busy for years. As dawn approached, Sarah realized they were facing a decision that would affect millions of people around the world. The truth about Michael Jackson's death and secret survival would devastate his fans, vindicate his family's private doubts, and expose a level of corruption in the entertainment industry that most people couldn't imagine. But perhaps most importantly, it would finally give Michael Jackson the justice he had been seeking for 15 years, even though he had not lived to see it achieved. The sun rose over Forest Lawn Memorial Park to find the greatest secret in entertainment history teetering on the edge of exposure. Dr. Sarah Chen faced a decision that would affect not just the Jackson family, but millions of fans worldwide and an industry built on carefully constructed images and hidden truths. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. Forensic analysis confirmed that the handwriting in all documents was authentically Michael Jackson's. The recording equipment contained hours of video testimony, recorded over 15 years, documenting his life in hiding and the systematic harassment that had driven him underground. DNA analysis of items in the second casket matched samples from Michael's children, confirming their authenticity. But most damning of all was a digital archive that revealed the scope of the conspiracy against him. Bank records showed systematic theft of hundreds of millions of dollars from Michael's accounts. Medical records revealed forced administration of drugs without his knowledge or consent. Communication intercepts demonstrated a coordinated campaign to destroy his reputation and isolate him from allies who might have protected him. Judge Williams arrived at the mausoleum before sunrise, his face gray with the weight of decisions no judge should have to make. The legal implications were staggering. If they revealed the truth, dozens of powerful individuals would face criminal charges, the entertainment industry would be devastated by scandal, and the public's faith in official investigations would be shattered. Dr. Chen, the judge said as he surveyed the evidence laid out across tables throughout the mausoleum, "In 40 years on the bench, I've never encountered anything like this. We're not just dealing with a fake death. We're looking at 15 years of conspiracy, systematic fraud, and ultimately murder." Katherine Jackson had remained in the mausoleum throughout the night, refusing to leave despite her advanced age and obvious exhaustion. She sat beside the open casket containing her son's actual remains, one hand resting on the bronze edge as if she could somehow communicate with him across the barrier of death. "All those years," she whispered to no one in particular, "he was out there somewhere, thinking about us, wanting to come home. And we were here grieving for someone who was still alive and suffering." The documents revealed that Michael had attempted to contact his family indirectly several times over the years. Anonymous gifts that had appeared on his children's birthdays, mysterious donations to Catherine's favorite charities, support for various Jackson family ventures that had been attributed to unnamed benefactors, or had been Michael's attempts to care for his family while maintaining the fiction of his death. Paris Jackson had spent the night reading through her father's hidden journals, tears streaming down her face as she discovered the depth of his love and the extent of his sacrifice. In entry after entry, he wrote about watching her grow up through secret surveillance, about his pride in her accomplishments, about his desperate wish to hold his children just once more. "He never stopped being our father," Paris told Prince as they stood together in the morning light filtering through the mausoleum's stained glass windows. "Even when he couldn't be with us, he was still protecting us, still trying to take care of us." The investigation team had worked through the night to verify the most explosive allegations in Michael's hidden archive. Phone records, financial documents, and recorded conversations painted a picture of systematic exploitation that had begun in the final years of Michael's official life, and had continued even after his supposed death. The conspiracy had involved his former manager, several pharmaceutical executives, media figures who had sensationalized stories about his health and behavior, and financial advisors who had systematically looted his estate. They had been so successful in isolating and manipulating him that when he finally staged his death to escape them, they had been able to continue profiting from his legacy while simultaneously hunting him to prevent his return. Dr. Webb completed his examination of Michael's actual remains and confirmed what the documents already suggested. He had been murdered approximately 6 months earlier. The cause of death was sophisticated poison designed to mimic natural causes, but forensic analysis revealed traces of compounds that could only have been administered deliberately. Whoever did this was knowledgeable about both chemistry and human physiology, Dr. Webb reported to Judge Williams. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was a calculated assassination carried out by someone with significant resources and expertise. The network that had protected Michael for 15 years had also been systematically eliminated. According to the final entries in his journal, Michael had watched his protectors disappear one by one over the previous year, each death or disappearance appearing accidental or natural to outside observers. By the time his enemies had tracked him to his final hiding place, he had been almost completely alone, protected only by a handful of loyal friends who had died trying to keep him safe. His final journal entry, written just days before his murder, expressed resignation mixed with a kind of peace. "I may not live to see justice done," he had written, "but at least now the evidence exists. My children will know the truth about what happened to their father, and perhaps that will be enough." As morning progressed, the investigation team faced increasing pressure from outside sources. Phone calls poured in from lawyers representing various entertainment industry figures, all demanding information about the investigation's scope and findings. News helicopters circled overhead, and the crowd of fans and reporters outside Forest Lawn had grown to thousands. Sarah realized they had reached a point where secrecy was no longer possible. Too many people were involved. Too much evidence existed, and too many powerful interests were panicking about potential exposure. The truth was going to come out, but the manner of its revelation would determine whether justice was served or whether the conspiracy would find new ways to protect itself. Judge Williams called an emergency session of his court for that afternoon, understanding that decisions made in the next few hours would reverberate through history. The Jackson family would have to decide whether they wanted justice for Michael, even if it meant subjecting themselves to years of public scrutiny and legal battles against some of the most powerful people in America. As the morning sun climbed higher over Forest Lawn, casting sharp shadows across the Memorial Park, everyone involved understood that they stood at a crossroads that would define Michael Jackson's legacy and potentially transform an entire industry built on secrets and carefully constructed lies. The emergency court session convened at 2 p.m. in a Los Angeles courtroom packed with lawyers, media representatives, and Jackson family members. Judge Williams had made the unprecedented decision to allow live broadcasting, understanding that the scope of the revelations demanded complete transparency to prevent further cover-ups or manipulation. The courtroom fell silent as Dr. Sarah Chen took the stand and began presenting the evidence that would rewrite history. Her testimony, delivered with scientific precision and emotional restraint, painted a picture of systematic abuse, exploitation, and ultimately murder that shocked even seasoned legal observers. The first bombshell came when she revealed that Michael Jackson's death in 2009 had been entirely fabricated. The body in the original casket had been a sophisticated decoy created by Hollywood special effects experts who had been hired by Michael's small circle of trusted allies. The funeral, attended by millions via television broadcast, had been the burial of an elaborate fake. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Chen testified, the evidence is conclusive. Michael Jackson successfully faked his death 15 years ago as the only means of escaping a conspiracy that had made his life unbearable. He lived in hiding for 15 years before being murdered in 2024. The courtroom erupted in gasps and murmurs that Judge Williams struggled to control. In the gallery, Katherine Jackson sat surrounded by her family, tears streaming down her face as a truth she had somehow always known was finally spoken aloud in a court of law. The second revelation was even more devastating to the entertainment industry. Dr. Chen presented financial records showing that over $400 million had been systematically stolen from Michael's accounts before and after his staged death. The theft had involved forged documents, fraudulent medical treatments designed to incapacitate him, and a coordinated media campaign to destroy his reputation and isolate him from potential allies. The evidence shows a conspiracy involving at least 23 individuals across multiple industries. Dr. Chen continued. They had turned Michael Jackson's life into a prison, controlling his medication, his finances, his access to his children, and his ability to make independent decisions about his career and personal life. Prince Jackson took the stand next, reading excerpts from his father's hidden journals that detailed 15 years of life in exile. His voice broke repeatedly as he shared his father's words about watching his children grow up from a distance, unable to comfort them in their grief or celebrate their achievements. My father wrote, I watched them through surveillance cameras and news reports like a ghost watching the living, Prince testified. Every day I want to run to them, to hold them, to tell them I'm alive and I love them. But I know that revealing myself would put them in the same danger that drove me away. The most damning evidence came from the digital archives that Michael had compiled during his years in hiding. Hours of secretly recorded conversations revealed the scope of corruption in the entertainment industry, pharmaceutical companies, and media organizations. The recordings captured powerful figures discussing Michael's elimination as if it were a business transaction. One recording, played in court, featured a pharmaceutical executive saying, Jackson is becoming a liability. If he ever gets clean and starts talking about what we've been doing, it'll destroy the entire system. We need a permanent solution. Paris Jackson's testimony revealed how her father had tried to maintain contact with his family through anonymous gestures and gifts. She had kept records of mysterious occurrences over the years, flowers that appeared on her mother's grave with no card, donations to family charities from untraceable sources, and most poignantly, a lullaby hummed outside her window on nights when she couldn't sleep. I always felt like someone was watching over us, Paris testified. Now I know it was my father, trying to take care of us even when he couldn't be with us. The investigation had also uncovered the network of people who had protected Michael during his 15 years underground. Most were ordinary individuals. A nurse in Brazil, a retired teacher in Argentina, a small-town doctor in Paraguay, who had risked everything to help a man they saw as a victim of powerful forces beyond his control. Tragically, the investigation revealed that most of Michael's protectors had been systematically eliminated in the year before his murder. Their deaths had been made to look accidental or natural, but forensic analysis revealed patterns consistent with professional assassination. Dr. Webb's medical testimony confirmed that Michael had been murdered using a sophisticated poison that would have been undetectable without specific testing. The compound use was available only to individuals with connections to certain government or pharmaceutical research programs, narrowing the list of potential killers to a small group of highly specialized individuals. Judge Williams announced that based on the evidence presented, he was issuing warrants for the arrest of 19 individuals on charges ranging from conspiracy and fraud to murder. The list included several of the most powerful names in entertainment, pharmaceutical executives, and media figures who had built careers on stories about Michael's supposed erratic behavior and declining health. The revelation sent shockwaves through the stock market as shares in several major entertainment and pharmaceutical companies plummeted. Within hours, 3 executives had resigned their positions, and lawyers for multiple defendants were requesting immunity deals in exchange for testimony against higher-level conspirators. Katherine Jackson's statement to the court provided the emotional climax to a day of devastating revelations. Speaking in a voice strengthened by 15 years of hidden grief finally given voice, she addressed not just the court but the world. "My son was murdered twice," she said. "First, they killed his spirit and drove him into hiding where he couldn't be with the people he loved. Then, when he had finally gathered the evidence to expose them, they killed his body. But they couldn't kill the truth, and today that truth sets him free." The court session concluded with Judge Williams announcing the formation of a special prosecutor's office dedicated to investigating the full scope of the conspiracy. The Jackson family would receive control of Michael's hidden archives, ensuring that his 15 years of evidence collection would be used to bring his killers to justice. As news of the revelation spread around the world, millions of fans who had mourned Michael Jackson's death in 2009 found themselves grieving anew, not just for his loss, but for the 15 years of hidden suffering that had preceded his actual murder. The man who had brought joy to billions had spent his final years as a prisoner of his own fame, unable to enjoy the love of his family or the adoration of his fans. But in death, Michael Jackson had finally achieved something that had eluded him in life: complete vindication and the promise that those who had destroyed him would face justice. The truth, hidden for 15 years behind marble walls and buried beneath layers of conspiracy, had finally emerged to shine light on one of the darkest chapters in entertainment history. His music would play on, his legacy would endure, but now the world would also remember Michael Jackson as a man who had sacrificed everything, including 15 years of his life, to ensure that the truth would someday set both him and his family free.